and welcome to our new edition of our Teaching and Learning podcast. So my name is Sadie Garner, I'm Head of Teaching and Learning here at Itchen College.
And I'm James Bedwell, Teacher of PE and also Teaching and Learning Coach at Itchen Sixth Form.
So we're going to look at reviewing material, but really specifically try and look at things like revision. So in terms of memory, we know that consolidating of information requires sleep. So what that means is there's a long period of time where learning or memory is incredibly fragile. So we teach them in the morning at, say, 10 o'clock, and then their brains won't start to try and consolidate and process that until they go to sleep at night. So their hippocampus is what will take the information you've taught them, and as they sleep, it will push that information in traces to the kind of outer part of their brains. So there's a long time where learning can be disruptive or altered. And that's why refreshers or reviewing of that material is so important, that those connections are established and then get really, really, really strong.
I think it's important to note as well when we're talking about memory is the fact that our working memory, our short-term memory is limited in terms of its capacity, its duration, and therefore what we are trying to do is to encourage as much of that information to be stored in the long-term memory. And then a lot of what we cover today is going to look at how we actually retrieve or bring that back from the long-term memory back into the working memory for the exam. You know, I guess we're perfect time for exam season, bringing that back in the exam hall or whenever it is. So I thought we'd start by looking at retrieval and what us as teachers should be looking at doing or including in their lessons, not necessarily just at this point, but throughout the whole year, really, because when we talk about retrieval, it shouldn't be something we leave to the end of the year and go, right, now let's retrieve back to year one, September time, because actually we're going to struggle to retrieve that as quite a high retrieval difficulty. So in terms of what we should be doing throughout the course of the year, but also at this time of year, building to the exams, is including as much opportunities for retrieval as possible. And what we mean by that is bringing back from the long term. So we should see the students challenging themselves and pulling that funny face in terms of, oh, it's there, it's on the tip of my tongue. So lots of ideas, including sort of brain dumps or brain drains, whatever you might refer to them as, on whiteboards, pieces of paper. Get as much information you can about this topic. Off you go, you've got 2 minutes. And I guess one of the strategies I use is, you know, they might come up with 6-7 bits of information, right, in a different coloured pen. You're going to add anything else that you think is really important that your partners managed to get down as well. Those are the bits you probably need to practice a little bit more on. Quizzes, Quizlet activities. And again, not just from the recent content, but going back to the beginning of the year. I've made reference to flashcards. It's really valuable because if we think about the book, we're looking at page 40, where we're making the retrieval as time efficient as possible and workload efficient. So as teachers, it shouldn't be everything that we're preparing, but a brain dump takes 10 seconds to prepare. Right, whiteboards, go, here's the topic. Flashcards, really quick and easy if they've prepared them throughout the year. So we want ideas that are going to be varied, but also time efficient and easy on our workload as well.
Definitely. So the whole thing of retrieval grids at the start of the lesson on whiteboards, and actually I think for me, we get them revising in the second year from week one. So I think it's really important that as teachers, we really have planned in exactly what the learners are revising each week so that they are getting as much support as possible. And then, like you say, in lessons, we're modelling that retrieval from lesson one. So we go, right, or lesson two, I suppose, we did these six names last lesson. So you've got 7 minutes to remember what they said. After those 7 minutes, you might give some kind of memory jogs towards the end of those 7 minutes, and then they grab their, for us, coloured grid, reteach themselves. So I think it's also really important to bear in mind things like knowledge organisers or spec checks. So kind of something that they can reteach themselves from, they can grab quickly and go, oh yeah, validity, oh yep, that name, that thing, so that they've got something to use for their revision. Because I don't know about you, James, but mine always say to me at the end of the year, could you just tell me everything I need to know for Comp 1? And you're like, yeah, it's that whole folder, but it's really helpful if you, for example, we've got a bright yellow spec check, so everything's in there that's filled in as they go, and that's their revision. On that revision point, I think it's really worth, I know we as teachers no doubt know this, but in terms of multitasking, they can't cognitively multitask. It's not physically possible for humans to do it. So you can walk and talk, but what you cannot do is cognitively multitask. So we can't watch TV and complete an assignment. It's just physically not possible. And what happens is they task switch. They actually switch between the two. So their brain, their ability to understand and process new information is physically impaired. So they can't revise while they listen to music or whilst they're watching TV. It's not physically possible. And the other thing is sleep. So again, we know they like to pull an all-nighter or try and cram it, but we also know from studies that students who got a really good night's sleep, so a Harvard study found that they retain 35% more information than if they have studied in the morning for a test in the afternoon. So along with modelling really good retrieval in lessons and really planning their revision for them, I think it's worth them bearing in mind those two key bits of information.
Building on the bit about being able to sort of multitask, I guess, in some lessons, teachers might encourage students to use phones for like a quizzes or a Quizlet sort of activity or similar. But really important when students are retrieving and revising from home, that it's not my phone's on the side there and these messages are coming through and I'm revising, and like you say, our working memory is limited, and we want to take away all the sort of distractions in the background so we can actually focus on ensuring that information is going into long-term memory and then being retrieved from our long-term memory as well. Based on that as well, I think we've made reference to here at the college in terms of the optimal sort of time frame, or a general time frame we should be aiming for in terms of study and sort of study break as well. So there's a couple of different sort of ideas. Do you want to talk through in terms of input and sort of teaching time first?
So in an hour of revision, 40 minutes should be retrieval and 20 minutes would be learning. So retrieval in terms of brain dumping on the whiteboard, retrieval in terms of flashcards. But they often like to read. They want to read because reading is so much easier and retrieval is really hard, but it has to be 40 minutes within the hour. And in terms of, I always teach mine, because our age group's a bit older, they're 16 to 19. So I teach them 40 minutes of revision, but again, half an hour of that needs to be retrieval, 10-minute break.
Yeah. 40
minutes of revision, again, focus on retrieval, 10-minute break. And then one more set of 40 minutes, then they get an hour off. So I always teach them to do that, because after 40 minutes, they physically can't, their brain can't suck up any more information, so it's a waste of their time and energy. It's not efficient for them. So 40-10, 40-10, 40 hour. And
I think that's where students start to, we were discussing beforehand, where they're doing their flashcard work and they start to, at the end of that 40 minutes, they've got their flashcard and it's, I don't know, they might be looking at the aerobic energy system for me, and they sort of naturally just turn the card. They don't actually retrieve, they just turn and read and go, oh yeah, I did know. Yeah, it's in the presence of oxygen, and I did know the 3 stages and the ATP yield. So they start to cheat. So that 10 minutes of refresh, right, go get some fresh air, use your phone, do what you need to do, those distractions, and then back to 40 minutes again, of which, like we said, should be half an hour, should be of getting information out. So the key thing, I guess the key principle for me in terms of retrieval during the year as teachers or when students are revising is it's about getting information out. Rather than trying to put more in.
Absolutely.
So it's not reading notes, it's not rewriting notes trying to put in, but it's now information coming out, put it onto the whiteboard, verbalise that response, do your past paper questions, you're coming up with the information get information out rather than trying to put it in.
Absolutely. And past papers, so we know without doubt that the top achieving students do the most past papers. There is quite literally, it's the number one predictor. So we know that the students who do the most practice past papers in terms of planning them, because they're retrieving and applying it to the exam question and then checking the mark schemes and going, oh, yeah, we've got that. They do much better. So you can rank a class quite literally on how well they'll do depending on how many past papers they've done. And things like, examiners' reports and mark schemes, us as teachers making it really clear. It says 3 paragraphs. So for top band, we need 3 paragraphs, and we need really 2 to 3 for us sociologists in each paragraph. So, really making sure that they're clear. And, retrieving is also us modelling the skills and what's required. And we do that all year. But again, prior to the exam, reviewing with them the skills. How do you show an examiner you're doing analysis? Well, if I don't see this shows or this means, you're not doing AO2.
Yeah.
And AO2 is worth 6 out of 15. 6 out of 15 is probably going to be a grade. So really reviewing the skill and making sure they're crystal clear, I think.
I guess sort of another note to build on that idea of past papers being really valuable is that in most cases the students' exams are going to be free recall or in a position where they need to describe this, explain this, analyse, discuss. So yes, there is value in terms of things like quizzes, Quizlets and the flashcards where we're verbalising keywords and definitions. But the suggestion is, the research is suggesting that actually we should be trying to retrieve in the same format of the final exam. So unless we're doing multiple choice exams,
agreed.
The quizzes, the Quizlets,
Yeah.
are good to build knowledge, but then for us to go, excellent, now I'm in a good position, off to past paper questions, rather than continuing just with the multiple choice questions, rather than just the keyword or the key name, key date, for example, but it needs to match the format of the exam.
100%, because we do them as a 5-minute warm-up, and then we get to our retrieval grid, and then we do them before we break, because by this point they're shattered. And so it's easy retrieval, but they will never get multiple choice. So we do it, again, like a warm-up or a cool down, I suppose, is how we. I think the other thing that I would give as a really key tip is. Really, so again, as teachers looking at those mark schemes, coming up with patterns, coming up with themes, I think is the best kind of advice. But also from that, so creating, I said about a spec check, we literally grid the spec. Mm-hmm. And once we've done that, 3 bits of the spec in the lesson, they fill it in as part of a, retrieval activity.
Yeah.
But it's there for them. So we use colour grids because for them, it's really easy for them. But also things like acronyms. So for our 15 marker, they have to have RISE in it. They have to have 3 social process words. So I need to see RISE as role models, imitation, sanctions, exclusion. So it's on the board. Obviously, there's only 4 and they need to give us 3 per paragraph, but they must rise in a 15 marker. Mm-hmm. And that comes from the examiner's mark schemes.
Yeah.
And then the same thing for us with our 20 markers for methods, they have to pervert structure it. And then that again comes from the mark schemes. They will give us all of those hints and tips that no doubt we as teachers use. But I would just recommend, for really good modelling and structure, trying to turn those tips into acronyms that they can use in the exam itself. Just, when they need a support, they can go straight back to that Grover and go, okay, generalisability, and it calms them and helps process it.
And important as well when you go back to memory, in terms of that's just a way of chunking information, which again helps to store memory, store information into the long-term memory, and therefore that's the type of thing that teachers should be doing throughout the year.
Yeah.
But highlighted to the students, remember that acronym. Okay, off you go. There's the retrieval on your boards. Off you go.
Yeah.
I guess the final thing, sort of, I wanted to make reference to is, and this is based on speaking to some of my students this week, where they've gone, do you know what? I'm smashing this content, and I'm going to do it again tonight. And I've been saying to them, it's the opposite. So in sport, if you're really good at shooting with your right foot, then we probably need to focus on shooting with our left foot. So we need to focus on our weaknesses. So the bits that we are continuously retrieving really well and successfully, we can move further back. So we don't need to retrieve every day, but we might retrieve every week. And if we're still successfully retrieving that content or that topic every week, we can move that back to every fortnight or every month. And that gives us the opportunity to retrieve or have more retrieval attempts of the harder content, because that's the bits where we're going wrong. Therefore, we need more opportunities to retrieve. So I think that's a final point to be passing on to our students, especially at this time of year. We need to practice those bits which are more difficult rather than the bits that we're nailing and getting 100% correct.
Definitely. Because they're delicate, they're really delicate, and their confidence can be hit really hard.
Yeah.
So it's about kind of, you know, when I jump in a pool, I'm not jumping in the shallow end where it's really warm. I want to get in there, and we want to get them in a slightly more uncomfortable state where they're really pushing their brains to remember, rather than going, well, I know that and that feels nice and I'm going to keep doing
it's
that.
Outside the comfort zone. Yeah. There needs to be retrieval difficulty for it to be purposeful revision.
And I think when we model that all year in our class and say, this, you probably are in the forgetting curve now, and this isn't a nice feeling, and I know this is uncomfortable, but you're going to stay here for 2 more minutes and you're going to really push yourselves, and then we're going to reteach ourselves the gaps. So I think modelling that throughout the year just prepares them for those exams.
Definitely.
Lovely. But thanks for listening, and very much appreciated.